Have you ever imagined waking up, doing your job as you do every day, and suddenly being treated like a criminal, without even understanding why? Alina Vargas was in the Morrisons' kitchen at 6 in the morning, flour in her hands, preparing the family's breakfast as she had always done for the past 3 years. The light was still dim outside. The silence of the house was the same as every morning. But then the front door burst open. 2 police officers entered, without knocking, without warning. And before Alina could ask anything, before she could even clean her hands, the handcuffs were already on her wrists, cold, tight, real. Mrs. Morrison descended the stairs with an expression Alina had never seen before. It wasn't anger. It was something worse. It was indifference. As if Alina weren't a real person. As if the 3 years of work, of trust, of waking up before sunrise every day, meant absolutely nothing. Mrs. Morrison pointed at her and said just one sentence. "She's the one who stole my grandmother's jewels." Just like that. Without hesitation, without a doubt, as if it were obvious, as if Alina carried the guilt written on her face. And you know what's most terrifying? Nobody questioned it. None of the police officers asked if there was evidence. None of the other house staff dared to defend Alina. Everyone simply accepted it. Because when you're poor, when you're an immigrant, when you're invisible most of the time, people don't need proof to condemn you. They just need an excuse. Have you ever been through that? Have you ever felt that? No matter how hard you try, no matter how honest you are, in the end, you'll always be the first one to be blamed. Alina was taken to the police station that same morning. She didn't even get to say goodbye to her daughter. She couldn't even explain. The 7-year-old girl would wake up in a few hours and look for her mother in the kitchen, as she always did, and her mother wouldn't be there. Thought about this the whole time in the back of the police car. She thought about how she would explain it. She thought about how she would prove her innocence. But mainly, she thought about how the world decides who deserves to be protected, and who doesn't. At the police station, no one looked her in the eye. The detective who took the case already had the file prepared. He had already made his decision. He didn't even ask any real questions. He just repeated what the Morrisons had said. And Alina repeated the only truth she knew. "I didn't take anything. I didn't even know there were jewels in that drawer." But the truth, when you are who Alina is, doesn't weigh as heavily as it should. Stay with me until the end, because what happens next will make you question everything you thought you knew about justice. While Alina sat in that cold room, handcuffed, waiting to be transferred to the county jail, something was happening upstairs in the police station. Something that would change everything. Because not everyone had accepted the Morrisons' version of events. Not everyone had turned their backs on them. There was a man, a sheriff, who had seen too many lies in his life not to recognize the truth when it was right in front of him, and he was about to do something that would put his career at risk, his reputation on the line, and Alina's life on a completely different path than anyone could have imagined. This sheriff's name was James Holt. He wasn't the kind of man who liked the spotlight. He wasn't a movie hero. He was just someone who had learned, after years working in that small town, that people lie, and that the more power they have, the more convincing their lies become. Holt had seen the Morrisons at church, at charity dinners, at political campaigns. He knew exactly who they were. And he knew that families like that didn't accuse employees of theft by accident. There was something wrong with that whole story. Something that nobody was questioning. So he did what no one else did. He went down to the interrogation room where Alina was waiting. He sat down in front of her and simply looked. Really looked. Not with suspicion, not with judgment. He just looked. And what he saw wasn't a thief. It wasn't someone nervous trying to make up a story. What he saw was confusion, fear, and a woman who didn't understand why she was there. Alina looked up at him, tired, and said again, as if repeating herself made any difference, "I didn't take anything. I just work there. I take care of that house as if it were my own." Holt believed her. Not because he was naive, but because he knew the difference between guilt and despair. And Alina was desperate. If something like this has ever happened to you, if you've ever been judged before having a chance to defend yourself, share it in the comments. I read them all, and I know I'm not alone here. Holt requested access to the mansion's security cameras, something that, strangely, no one had yet requested. When he reviewed the recordings, he found exactly what he expected: nothing. The cameras in the hallway where the family's bedrooms were located had been turned off precisely at the time the alleged robbery had occurred. Coincidence? Holt didn't believe in coincidences. He returned to the police station, pulled up the initial report, and realized that no one had asked the right questions. No one had truly investigated. Everyone simply accepted the Morrisons' word as law, and that's when Holt began to understand the magnitude of the problem. Because it wasn't just about jewels. It was about power. It was about who the city protected and who the city discarded. Alina was disposable. To the Morrisons, to the system, to the police themselves. But not to Holt. If this part touched you, if you felt the injustice of it all, leave a like here. It helps me continue bringing stories that truly matter. Holt began investigating on his own, discreetly, because he knew that if the Morrisons found out, they would do everything to stop him, and they had the means to do so. They funded half the city. The mayor owed them favors. The police chief played golf with Mr. Morrison every Saturday. Holt was alone in this, but he persisted. He checked bank records. He searched online for sales of similar jewelry, and he found it. The jewelry Alina allegedly stole was sold 3 weeks before the accusation. The seller, the Morrison's son, a young man in his 20s with gambling debts and a history of lies that the family had always covered up. Holt had the truth in his hands, but the truth, he knew, isn't always enough. Not when you're facing a family that could destroy your career with a phone call. Not when the entire system is designed to protect people like them. If you want to see more stories like this, stories about real justice, about people fighting against the system, subscribe to the channel. I post every week, and every story matters. So Holt made a choice. He went back to the cell where Alina was, and showed her what he had found. She looked at the documents, at the evidence, and for the first time since that morning, she cried. Not from relief, but from anger. Because she realized she always knew. Deep down, she always knew she was being used. That it was never about the jewels. It was about having someone to blame. Someone no one would defend. And now there was someone willing to defend her. But at what cost? Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because the truth about Alina doesn't begin that morning when she was handcuffed. The truth begins 3 years earlier, when she knocked on the Morrisons' door with a simple resume, trembling hands, and a 4-year-old daughter waiting at daycare. Alina Vargas didn't have impressive references. She had no formal education beyond high school, but she had something she believed was enough, a willingness to work. And she worked. God, how she worked. She woke up at 5 a.m. the morning every day, prepared the family's breakfast before sunrise, cleaned every room in that mansion as if it were her own, cooked, ironed, organized. She knew the Morrisons better than they knew themselves. She knew that Mr. Morrison liked his coffee stronger on Mondays. She knew that Mrs. Morrison preferred towels folded in a specific way. She knew that their son would sneak out at night and come back with red eyes. But nobody knew anything about Alina. Nobody asked. Nobody knew she had a daughter named Sophia, who drew butterflies in all her notebooks and dreamed of being a veterinarian. Nobody knew that Alina never took a day off because she couldn't afford to lose a single penny. Nobody knew that she sometimes lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling of the tiny apartment where she lived, wondering if she would ever be able to give Sophia the kind of life the children in the Morrison mansion had. She wasn't invisible by choice. She was invisible because nobody ever really looked at her. And until that day, until she was handcuffed in the kitchen where she spent 3 years of her life, Alina believed that hard work and honesty were enough. She believed that if she did everything right, if she never complained, if she was perfect, she would be seen. But the truth is that people like Alina are only seen when they need to be blamed. Holt understood this when he began piecing together her life. He didn't do it in an intrusive way. He simply paid attention. He talked to Elena's neighbors. He talked to Sophia's teacher. He discovered that Elena was the mother who never missed school meetings, even when she had to rush home from work. She was the mother who sewed her daughter's uniform when it tore because she didn't have the money to buy a new one. She was the mother who kept every drawing, every note, every test with a gold star. And Holt realized something that changed everything for him. Alina wasn't just innocent. She was exactly the kind of person the system was supposed to protect, and instead, the system was destroying her. Holt's transformation began quietly. He had seen injustice before. He had seen people wrongfully convicted. But something about this case was different. Perhaps it was the way Alina looked at him, with that mixture of hope and resignation, as if she didn't dare believe that someone was finally on her side. Perhaps it was the photo of Sophia she carried in her wallet, crumpled from being touched so often. Or perhaps it was the fact that, for the first time in years, Holt was facing a decision that would define who he truly was. Not as sheriff, but as a man. He began visiting her in prison. At first, they were just professional visits, reviewing case details, questions about her routine at the Morrisons' house. But then the conversations changed. Holt asked about Sophia. Alina spoke about her daughter with a light in her eyes that he hadn't seen before. She spoke about how Sophia drew horses even though she had never seen one up close. She spoke about how the girl asked when her mother would come home. And then Alina asked something that caught Holt off guard. She asked, "Why are you doing this? Why do you believe me when no one else does?" Holt didn't have a ready answer. He only knew that he couldn't look at her and accept the injustice. He couldn't go home at night, knowing that an innocent woman was rotting in a cell while the real culprit slept in silk sheets. Their emotional journey began there. It wasn't physical attraction. It wasn't a soap opera romance. It was something much deeper and more frightening. It was trust. Alina had built walls around her heart over the years. Walls erected for every time she was ignored, devalued, discarded. But Holt, without even realizing it, was tearing down those walls brick by brick, just by being present, just by believing. And Holt, who had spent his entire life being the man who solves problems but never gets emotionally involved, was feeling something he hadn't felt in years. He was feeling that he mattered, that his choices had real weight, that he could be more than just a badge and a gun. But the danger was far from over. In fact, it was only beginning. Because when Holt presented his findings to the prosecutor, when he showed proof that the Morrisons' son had sold the jewelry weeks before the accusation, when he demanded that the case against Alina be dropped, the Morrisons reacted. And they reacted forcefully. Mr. Morrison called the police chief. He called the mayor. He called everyone who owed him favors. And the message was clear. Either Holt backed down or Holt paid. The pressure came from all sides. Coworkers who once greeted Holt now avoided him in the hallways. The boss called him into a meeting and told him bluntly that he was committing professional suicide. That some battles weren't worth fighting. That Alina was just another immigrant in a city full of them, and that he was throwing away years of his career for what? For principles. And that's when Holt had to face the moral dilemma that would change everything. He had the evidence, he had the truth, but presenting it meant more than just confronting the Morrisons. It meant admitting that the system he swore to protect was corrupt. It meant losing the career he had built. It meant becoming the town's outcast. And for what? To save a woman he barely knew. A woman who, according to everyone around him, had no future anyway. Holt spent sleepless nights with these questions on his mind. He looked at his badge and wondered what it really meant. And then he remembered Sophia, the 7-year-old girl waiting for her mother. And he realized the question wasn't whether it was worth it. The question was, what kind of man would he be if he did nothing? The impact of that decision was immediate. Holt officially presented the evidence. The case against Alina was dismissed. She was released, but the Morrisons were untouched. Their son was sent to a private rehabilitation clinic with all the discretion that money can buy. The family remained untouchable, remained powerful, continued smiling at charity events as if nothing had happened. And Holt was transferred, demoted. His name became synonymous with trouble at the precinct. He lost friends. He lost respect. He lost everything he had built. But when he saw Alina leaving prison, holding her daughter in her arms, crying with relief, he knew he had made the right choice. But the story doesn't end happily. Because Alina was free, but not absolved in the eyes of the city. She lost her job. She lost her reputation. No one wanted to hire the woman who almost robbed the Morrisons. She couldn't pay the rent. She couldn't feed Sophia. And for the first time, she realized that freedom without dignity is just another form of imprisonment. She was outside the bars, but the world still treated her as guilty. And it was at that moment, at that point of absolute despair, that Holt appeared again. He found her outside the police station, holding her daughter's backpack, not knowing where to go, and he said something that changed everything. He said, "I know you have no reason to trust anyone else, but if you want to rebuild this, you won't do it alone." Comment below. This makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what happened to Alina wasn't just a false accusation. It was a complete collapse of everything that should have protected her. And this collapse began long before the handcuffs touched her wrists. It began the moment the Morrisons decided she was the most convenient solution to their problem. They didn't need proof. They didn't need logic. They just needed to point the finger. And the rest of the world did exactly what it always does with people like Alina. Accepted it without question. The Morrison family's lawyer had already prepared a confession document before Alina even arrived at the police station. Read that again. They already had the confession ready, as if it were just a pending signature, as if there wasn't even a possibility of her being innocent. The document stated that Alina admitted to stealing the jewels, that she was remorseful, that she was returning everything and waiving any legal action against the family. All very clean. All very convenient. They just needed her to sign. And when Alina refused, when she looked at that paper and said, "I'm not going to sign," something that's a lie, the lawyer just smiled, as if she had just made the worst decision of her life. And maybe she had. Because at that moment, Alina ceased to be a problematic employee and became a threat. The other employees of the mansion, people with whom Alina had worked side by side for 3 years, simply disappeared. Maria, the cook who shared recipes with Alina, avoided looking at her when the police took her away. Carlos, the gardener who always played with Sophia when Alina brought the girl to work, turned his face away. No one said a word in her defense. No one dared. Because everyone knew the truth that Alina was learning the hard way. Loyalty only exists as long as you don't bother the powerful. The second you become inconvenient, all that camaraderie, all that respect, all that humanity evaporates, and you realize you were always disposable, always replaceable, always nothing. At the police station, the detective assigned to the case didn't even pretend to investigate. He had a clipboard, a standard form, and zero interest in the truth. He asked her name, he asked her address, he asked how long she had worked for the Morrisons, and then he simply copied the statement the Morrisons had given, word for word. He didn't ask where Alina was at the time of the alleged robbery. He didn't ask if she had access to the room where the jewels were kept. He didn't ask anything a real investigator would ask, because he wasn't investigating. He was processing. Processing Alina as if she were a piece of paper, not a person. And the difference between those two things, Alina discovered, is everything. The entire town had already made up its mind before even knowing the details. In markets, churches, and cafes, people talked about that immigrant who robbed the Morrisons. No one used her name. No one asked if there was proof. The narrative was ready. Alina was guilty because she was poor, because she was an immigrant, because she was disposable. And in a small town like that, where the Morrisons paid salaries, funded events, and donated to institutions, their word was law. Questioning the Morrisons was questioning the entire structure of the town, and no one wanted to do that. So it was easier, much easier, to believe that Alina was exactly what they said she was. This is the hidden truth that no one wants to admit. The system didn't fail Alina. The system worked exactly as it was designed to work. It protected the powerful and crushed the vulnerable. And the scariest thing is that everyone participated. It wasn't just the Morrisons. It was the lawyer who prepared the false confession. It was the detective who didn't investigate. It was the coworkers who turned a blind eye. It was the neighbors who spread gossip. It was the entire city that decided Elena's life was worth less than the Morrisons' reputation. And that collective decision, that collective failure, is the kind of thing that shatters a person from the inside. Elena felt it. She felt the weight of being abandoned by everyone at once. There was nowhere to run. There was no one to call. Her own public defender, overwhelmed and disinterested, suggested she accept a plea bargain. "You'll get less time if you confess," she said, as if innocence were negotiable, as if the truth were just a legal strategy. Alina found herself sitting in that interrogation room, handcuffed, alone, and for the first time in her life, she thought about giving up. She thought about signing the paper. She thought about accepting guilt just to end it. Because when the whole world tells you you're guilty, eventually you start to doubt yourself. Eventually, the truth seems less important than peace. But then, Sophia appeared. The school called the emergency contact, and a social worker took the girl to the police station. Sophia was 7 years old, with huge, frightened eyes, and a drawing she had made that day. It was a drawing of her mother, with a crown, with wings, with the word heroine written in crooked letters. And when Alina saw that drawing, when she saw her daughter looking at her through the glass of the waiting room, something broke inside her. But it wasn't despair, it was anger, pure and righteous anger. Because she realized that signing that confession wasn't just lying about herself. It was lying to Sophia. It was teaching her daughter that the world can destroy you and you have to accept it. It was giving up. And Alina wasn't going to give up. Not for herself, but for that little girl who still believed her mother was a heroine. This was the version of Alina that Holt encountered when he entered the interrogation room. Not the broken woman everyone expected to see, but a furious woman. A woman who had decided to fight, even without weapons. And Holt recognized this immediately. He had seen resignation on hundreds of faces, but this wasn't resignation. This was fighting. And for the first time since the case began, Holt felt something he hadn't expected to feel. He felt hope. Because if Alina was still fighting, maybe he could fight too. Maybe there was still something worth saving in that town. The transformation in their relationship began with a simple question. Holt asked, "Are you afraid?" And Alina answered without hesitation, "I'm terrified. But fear won't save my daughter. The truth will." That answer changed everything. Because Holt realized that Alina wasn't asking to be saved. She was asking to be heard, to be believed, to be treated like a real person. And for the first time in his career, Holt understood that justice wasn't about applying the law. Justice was about seeing the people the system made invisible. He began working on the case differently, not as a sheriff following protocol, but as someone who truly cared about the outcome. He returned to the Morrison mansion unannounced. He interviewed the staff alone, away from the family's eyes, and he discovered things. Maria, the cook, finally admitted that she had seen the Morrison's son leaving his grandmother's room on the night of the alleged robbery. Carlos, the gardener, said he had overheard discussions about money between the son and his parents weeks before. No one had said this before because no one had asked, or rather, no one had really asked. No one had given them permission to challenge the Morrisons' narrative. Holt mounted a display case on his office wall. Photos, documents, lines connecting people and events. And at the center of it all, a photo of Alina. Not the mugshot, but a photo he'd taken from an old newspaper of a community event where Alina had volunteered. She was smiling in that photo, free, alive. And Holt looked at that photo every day and remembered what was really at stake. It wasn't just about proving innocence. It was about restoring the humanity of someone the world had decided to discard. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the moment Holt entered that interrogation room was the moment everything changed. Not dramatically, not with background music or slow motion. It was something silent, almost imperceptibly. But it changed. Holt had interrogated hundreds of people throughout his career. He had seen all kinds of reactions: nervousness, aggressiveness, desperation, well-rehearsed lies, poorly rehearsed lies. He knew the signs. He knew when someone was hiding something. He knew when someone was trying to manipulate the narrative. And when he opened the door and saw Alina sitting there, handcuffed, with her shoulders slumped and her eyes red from crying, he expected to see guilt, or at least fear. But what he saw was confusion. Pure and devastating confusion. Alina wasn't nervous in the traditional sense. She wasn't fidgeting frantically. She wasn't avoiding eye contact. She wasn't stammering. She was confused. Like a child who'd been punished without understanding what they'd done wrong. And that caught Holt off guard. Because guilty people know exactly why. They're being interrogated. They prepare answers. They build defenses. But Alina was genuinely trying to understand how she'd gotten there. And when Holt sat down in front of her and asked, "Tell me what happened," she didn't offer an elaborate version of events. She simply repeated the same thing she'd told everyone else, in the same words, in the same tone, as if repeating herself made any difference. "I didn't take anything. I didn't even know there were jewels in that drawer." Most interrogators would have interpreted this as stubbornness, as a refusal to cooperate. But Holt had learned, over the years, to listen not only to the words, but to what lay behind them. And behind Alina's words, there was no anger, no strategic defense. There was only honesty. The raw, desperate honesty of someone who doesn't know how to prove something that should be obvious. She didn't even know there were jewels in that drawer. And the more Holt thought about that sentence, the more sense it made. Why would a maid, who had worked in the same house for 3 years, who knew every room, every routine, every detail, suddenly steal something she didn't even know was there? It didn't make sense. And Holt had learned to trust when things didn't make sense. Because it usually meant the whole story was a lie. He did something none of the other investigators had done. He looked at Alina. Really? Not with the look of someone searching for guilt, but with the look of someone searching for truth. And he asked Alina, "Tell me something. If you were to steal something from that house, what would you steal?" The question caught her off guard. She blinked. She thought. And then she answered with brutal honesty. "Food. I would steal food. My daughter loves those imported cookies they have. I've always wanted to buy them for her, but I can't. So yes, if I were desperate enough, I would steal cookies, not jewelry." And it was at that moment that Holt was sure, absolutely sure, Alina was not guilty. Because liars don't say things like that. Liars construct safe answers. They say they would never steal anything, that they are too honest, that the accusation is outrageous. But Alina admitted she would steal, if necessary, if her daughter needed it. But cookies, not jewelry. And there was something so profoundly human in that answer, something so true, that Holt felt something he didn't expect to feel. He felt shame. Shame at being part of a system that had put that woman in that room. Shame at having waited so long to really listen to her. Holt had seen dozens of liars. Hundreds, maybe. He knew the signs, the irregular breathing, the gaze that darted away at the wrong moment, the hands that wouldn't stop fidgeting, the stories that changed slightly with each repetition. But Alina showed none of those signs. She maintained eye contact. She breathed normally. Her hands, even handcuffed, were still. In her story, it was exactly the same every time, because it wasn't a story, it was the truth. And the truth doesn't need adjusting, it doesn't need rehearsing, it simply is. Holt's transformation began there. It wasn't immediate. It wasn't as if he left the room and immediately decided to save Alina. It was more subtle. It was a seed of doubt that began to grow. Doubt about the case, doubt about the Morrisons, doubt about everything he had accepted as truth up to that point. He returned to his desk, picked up the initial case report, and began to read, really read, not just skimming the words, but analyzing every detail. And the more he read, the more he realized what was missing. There was no detailed inventory of the stolen jewels. There were no photos. There was no physical evidence beyond the Morrisons' word. And most importantly, there was no motive. No investigator had asked why Alina, after 3 years of impeccable work, would suddenly steal something. There was no logic. There was no pattern. It was as if everyone had simply accepted that maid steal because, well, just because. Holt began asking questions. Questions no one had asked before. He returned to the mansion and asked to see the room where the jewels were kept. Mrs. Morrison hesitated. She said she had already looked through everything, that there was nothing more to see. But Holt insisted. And when he finally entered that room, he immediately understood why she had hesitated. The drawer where the jewels were supposedly kept was inside a safe, a locked safe with a password. And Alina, according to the Morrisons themselves, never had access to that password. So how exactly could she have stolen something from a locked safe? Holt asked this. Mrs. Morrison turned pale. She stammered. She said that perhaps the safe had been opened that day. Perhaps she had forgotten to lock it. Perhaps, Holt knew what maybe meant. It meant improvisation. It meant the story was being adjusted in real time. And the more he pressed, the more the Morrison's narrative crumbled. He asked to see the security cameras. Mrs. Morrison said there weren't any cameras in that part of the house. Holt knew that was a lie. He'd seen the security system when he arrived. There were cameras everywhere. So he went straight to the technician who installed the system. And he discovered that the cameras in the hallway leading to the bedrooms had been manually turned off on the day of the supposed robbery. Turned off at 7 in the morning. Turned back on at 9, exactly the time the robbery supposedly took place. And only 3 people had access to the system: Mr. Morrison, Mrs. Morrison, and their son. The hidden truth was beginning to emerge, and it was a far dirtier truth than Holt had anticipated. Because it wasn't just about stolen jewels. It was about a family willing to destroy an innocent person's life to protect their own secrets. It was about privilege being used as a weapon. It was about absolute power corrupting the absolute. And Holt, who had always believed in the system, who had always trusted that justice would prevail in the end, was realizing that sometimes justice needs someone willing to force it to prevail. He went back to the interrogation room. Alina was still there, tired, defeated, but still confused. Still not understanding why she was being punished for something she didn't do. And Holt said something that no one else had said to her since it all began. He said, "I believe you." 3 words, simple, direct, but they carried the weight of the world. Because for Alina, who had spent days being treated like a liar, like a criminal, like less than human, hearing someone say they believed her was like breathing for the first time after being underwater for too long. And there, in that cold, impersonal room, something began to form between them. It wasn't romance. Not yet. It was something more fundamental. It was trust. And trust, when you've been betrayed by everyone around you, is worth more than anything else in the world. Comment below if you've ever been through something similar, when nobody believed in you and a single person made all the difference. Now I want to delve even deeper into this matter. Because the moment Holt discovered the truth about the cameras was the moment the case ceased to be about robbery and became about something far more sinister. He was in his office, late at night, with a cup of cold coffee on his desk and his eyes burning from staring at the computer screen. He had gained access to the security system records of the Morrison mansion, something he technically shouldn't have done without a warrant, but did anyway because he knew no one else would look for it. And there, in small print, in the digital record, was the proof that would change everything. The cameras in the hallway leading to the bedrooms, those that should have captured any movement in the area where the jewels were kept, had been turned off at 7:03 a.m. and turned back on at 9:15 a.m. exactly during the period when the alleged robbery supposedly took place. Holt stared at it for a long time. Not because he didn't understand what he was seeing, but because understanding meant accepting something he didn't want to accept. It meant accepting that this accusation wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. It was calculated. It was a setup from the start. And worse, it was done by people who knew exactly what they were doing. Because turning off security cameras isn't something that happens by accident. It's not something you do without thinking. It's something you do when you're hiding something. And the Morrisons were hiding something big. Holt printed the report. He put it in his pocket and drove to the police station where Alina was being held while awaiting transfer to the county jail. It was almost 11 o'clock at night. The station was empty, except for a sleepy officer at the reception desk who barely glanced when Holt passed by. He went down to the cells, where Alina sat on the concrete floor, leaning against the wall, her arms wrapped around her knees. She wasn't crying. She was just there, existing, surviving. And when she heard Holt's footsteps, she looked up with an expression he would never forget. It wasn't hope. It was exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying a weight that should never have been yours. Holt stopped in front of the cell. He didn't speak immediately. He just looked at her, and she looked back. And for a moment, there was only that heavy silence between two people who knew something was about to change. And then Holt asked, in a lower voice than he intended, "Do you know who has access to the house's security system?" Alina frowned. Not because she didn't know the answer, but because she didn't understand why he was asking. "Only the family," she replied. "Mr. Morrison, Mrs. Morrison, and their son." "Why?" And Holt took the paper from his pocket, unfolded it, and showed it to her through the bars. "Because someone turned off the cameras at exactly the time they say you stole the jewels, and you didn't have access to the system." Alina looked at the paper. She read the numbers, she read the dates, and then something happened on her face. Something Holt recognized immediately because he'd seen it in his own reflection earlier that night. It was the revelation that everything you thought you knew about the world was wrong. It was the moment you realize you're not just facing a problem, you're facing a conspiracy. "They knew," Alina whispered. "They knew from the beginning that I didn't steal anything, and they accused me anyway." And then she asked the question Holt was also trying to answer. "Why? Why would they do this to me?" Holt sat on the hallway floor, on the other side of the bars. It wasn't protocol. It wasn't professional. But he was tired of protocols and professionalism when the truth was being buried beneath layers of procedures and hierarchies. "Because you're convenient," he said. "Because when something goes wrong in the lives of powerful people, they need someone to blame. And you were there, working in their house. Invisible enough not to matter, but present enough to be the perfect target." He saw the pain flash across her face, not just the pain of being unjustly accused, but the pain of realizing that her entire existence in that family's life had been reduced to this, a scapegoat, a disposable person. It was at that moment that Holt realized something that went beyond the evidence and the camera footage. He realized that Alina wasn't being accused. She was being used. Used to cover up whatever the Morrison's son had done. Used to protect the family's reputation. Used because she was exactly the kind of person the system allows to be used. And for the first time since he started working as sheriff, Holt felt not just anger at the crime, but anger at the system that allowed crimes like this to happen. Because the real crime wasn't the theft of the jewels. The real crime was what was being done to Alina. The emotional journey between them changed that night. Until that moment, Holt had seen Alina as a victim who needed defending. But now he saw her for what she truly was, a survivor. Someone who had been attacked from all sides and still refused to completely fall apart. And Alina, who had initially seen Holt as just another authority figure who would likely disappoint her, began to see him as something different. She began to see him as someone who truly cared, not because it was his job, but because it was his choice. Holt spent the next few hours there, sitting on the cold hallway floor, talking to Alina through the bars. They didn't just talk about the case, they talked about lives, about choices, about how they had both arrived at that moment. Alina told him about coming to the country with her daughter, about how each day was a struggle to prove she deserved to be there, that she deserved to be treated like a human being. Holt told him about joining the police force, believing he could make a difference, and about how he had seen that belief tested every day by a system that protected the powerful and punished the weak. And somewhere between these stories, between these whispered confessions and the dim light of the empty police station, something began to grow between them. It wasn't just an alliance. It was a connection. A real and deep connection. Alina asked, "Why? Are you doing this? Why risk everything for someone you don't even know?" And Holt didn't have an easy answer. He thought for a long time, looking at his own hands, before answering. Because if I don't do this, who am I? What kind of man am I if I see the truth and choose to ignore it just because it's more convenient? My badge means nothing if I only use it to protect those who already have protection. And Alina, for the first time since it all began, felt something she had forgotten. She could feel hope. Not the naive hope that everything would magically be all right, but the grounded hope that maybe, just maybe, there was justice in the world. As long as someone was willing to fight for it, the transformation was complete. Holt was no longer just investigating a case. He was protecting Alina, and Alina was no longer just surviving. She was beginning to believe she could win. But they both knew that danger was far from over. Because the Morrisons weren't simply going to accept that someone was uncovering the truth. They were going to react. And when powerful people react, they don't play fair. Holt got up from the floor, brushed the dust off his pants, and looked at Alina one last time before leaving. "I'm going to get you out of here," he said. "No matter what I have to do, I'm going to get you out of here." And Alina believed him. Not because she had a choice, but because for the first time in a long time, someone had looked at her and seen not what she was accused of being, but who she really was. And that, in that dark and cold moment, was everything. Now I want to delve even deeper into this matter, because what happened after that night at the police station confirmed everything Holt suspected. The Morrisons weren't just a wealthy family trying to protect their reputation. They were dangerous. And when dangerous people feel they're losing control, they attack. The first attack came the following morning. Holt arrived at the police station and found a summons on his desk. The Morrisons had hired one of the most expensive lawyers in the state, a man known for destroying careers and winning impossible cases. And this lawyer wasn't just defending the family. He was attacking Alina with a ferocity that went beyond the professional. It was personal. It was calculated to annihilate any chance of defense before it even began. The lawyer had gone straight to the prosecutor and demanded that the case be expedited. No waiting weeks for the trial. No giving the overburdened public defense team time to build a decent case. They wanted Alina convicted quickly, before any real investigation could take place. And the prosecutor, who depended on campaign donations and had political ambitions, agreed without question. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 3 days later. 3 days. Alina had barely had time to process what was happening, and she was already being pushed toward a conviction that seemed inevitable. Because when you have enough money, you don't need justice, you buy speed. And speed, in the legal system, usually means guilt. Holt felt the weight of it like a punch to the gut. He had evidence, he had the camera footage, he had the inconsistencies in the Morrison story. But none of that mattered if Alina was convicted before he could present anything. And then came the call. His office phone rang at 10:15 a.m. It was the police chief. His voice was tense, controlled, but there was an implicit threat in every word. "James, we need to talk. Now." Holt went up to the chief's office, and before he even sat down, he knew what was coming. The chief closed the door. He crossed his arms and said with frightening calm, "Leave it alone, James. This family funds half the city. They pay for community programs, for the library renovation, for the summer festival. If you keep messing with this, you'll hurt not only yourself, but the entire precinct." Holt was silent for a moment. He looked at the man who had been his superior for over a decade, the man he respected, and saw something he had never seen before. He saw cowardice. He saw a man willing to sacrifice an innocent person to maintain the status quo. And Holt realized it wasn't just Alina against the Morrisons. It was Alina against the entire city. Against a system that depended on the Morrisons' money to function. And anyone who challenged that would become an enemy. "What if she's innocent?" Holt asked. The question hung in the air. The boss sighed. "That doesn't matter, James. Not in this case. Not with this family." And Holt knew in that moment that he had to make a choice. Obey and let Alina be destroyed. Or disobey and risk everything. He chose to disobey. Because some decisions define who you are. And Holt couldn't be the kind of man who turned his back when it mattered most. So he continued investigating. But now he had to do it in the shadows. Away from the boss's eyes. Away from official reports. He worked all night. He reviewed financial records. He looked for suspicious transactions. And then he found one. An online sale of antique jewelry, listed on an auction site 3 weeks before the alleged accusation. The descriptions matched exactly the jewelry Alina supposedly stole. Antique gold. Small diamonds, Victorian design. There was no way it could be a coincidence. And when Holt traced the seller's account, he discovered something that made everything fit. The account was registered in the name of a shell company, but the associated email address. It belonged to the Morrisons' son, the 24-year-old who had never worked a day in his life, who drove imported cars and frequented illegal casinos in neighboring cities. Holt dug deeper. He spoke to people the son owed money to. And he discovered that he had gambling debts reaching 6 figures. Debts to people who wouldn't accept excuses. People who broke bones when they weren't paid. And 3 weeks before the accusation against Alina, the Morrison's son had sold his grandmother's jewelry to pay part of that debt. But when the parents discovered the jewelry was missing, instead of confronting their son, instead of dealing with the devastating truth that they had raised a gambling addict who was destroying the family legacy, they chose to blame Alina. The revelation hit Holt like a bomb in the chest. Because it wasn't just cruelty, it was planning. The Morrisons knew exactly what they were doing when they accused Alina. Knew she was vulnerable. They knew no one would believe her. They knew they could sacrifice her to save their son. And they did it without hesitation, without remorse. Because for them, Alina wasn't a person. She was a tool, a means to an end. And Holt, looking at all that evidence scattered on his desk, felt a rage that surpassed anything he had ever felt. It wasn't just anger at the injustice, it was anger at the coldness, at the lack of humanity, at the way the Morrisons looked at someone like Alina and saw only something disposable. But the danger was mounting, because the Morrisons had eyes and ears everywhere. And when they began to realize that Holt wasn't backing down, when they realized he was digging deeper, they changed tactics. They started spreading rumors. Holt was obsessed with the case. Holt was developing an inappropriate relationship with the suspect. Holt was trying to sabotage the investigation because he had something to hide. The rumor spread quickly. Coworkers began to look at him differently. Conversations stopped when he entered the room. And then came the more direct threats. An envelope with no return address appeared on his desk. Inside, a photo of him leaving his house, of him at the market, of him entering the police station. The message was clear. We are watching you. We know where you live. We know your routine. Stop, or there will be consequences. Holt burned the photo. But he kept the ashes as a reminder. A reminder that he was fighting something much bigger than a false accusation. He was fighting an entire system built to protect the powerful. And that system wasn't going to let him win without a war. He returned to Elena's cell that night. He showed her the evidence he had found. He showed her the proof that the Morrison's son had sold the jewels, and he saw the transformation happen on her face. It wasn't relief, it was fury. Pure, justified fury. They destroyed my life to protect their son, she said, her voice trembling. They took everything from me. My job, my reputation. My daughter sees me through bars because of them. And for what? So that spoiled brat could keep playing games. Holt had no answer, because there was no answer that made sense of it. But he had something better than answers. He had proof. And he had determination. I'm going to present this, he said. I'm going to take it to the prosecutor. I'm going to force them to see the truth. Elena looked at him with a mixture of hope and fear. What if it doesn't work? What if they bury it too? And Holt, unsure if he was making a promise he could keep, said, then I'll make it public. I'll go to every newspaper, every TV station, every person willing to listen. They can't bury the truth if everyone knows it. The bond between them deepened that night in a way neither of them expected. It wasn't just about the case anymore. It was about two people facing something impossible together. Elena, who had spent her entire life being invisible, now had someone willing to risk everything to make her visible. And Holt, who had spent years mechanically enforcing the law, now understood what it truly meant to fight for justice. It meant choosing the right side even when everyone told you you were wrong. It meant protecting the unprotected. It meant being human first, officer later. Comment below if you think Holt should have made everything public immediately, or if he was right to try and work within the system first. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what Holt faced in those days wasn't just a professional decision. It was a dilemma that cut to the core of who he was as a person. He had the evidence. He had everything organized in a blue folder that he carried everywhere, as if it were an extension of his own body. Records of jewelry sales. Security system logs showing that the cameras were turned off. Testimonies from people confirming the Morrison's son's gambling debts. Evidence of suspicious bank transfers. Everything was there. Everything documented. Everything irrefutable. But having evidence and being able to use it are two completely different things. Because presenting that evidence didn't just mean freeing Elena. It meant declaring war on one of the most powerful families in the region. It meant destroying the Morrisons' reputation. It meant exposing their son as a thief and an addict. And it inevitably meant ending Holt's career. He knew it. He knew because he'd seen it happen to others. Officers who defied the wrong families. Prosecutors who went too far. Investigators who didn't understand that some people are above the law not because the law allows it, but because society allows it. They were transferred to small towns where nothing happened. They were forced into early retirement. They were isolated until the pressure became unbearable and they simply gave up. And Holt knew he would be next. He knew that the moment he placed those documents on the prosecutor's desk, his life as he knew it would end. No promotions, no respect, no future in that town. Maybe no future in any town. The temptation to back down was real. Not because Holt was a coward, but because he was human. He had bills to pay. He had a home. He had a life he had built over 15 years of hard work. and handing the case over to another department would be so easy. He could justify it. You could say you were doing the right thing by ensuring impartial investigators took over. You could wash your hands, keep your position, continue to be respected, continue to be the sheriff everyone knew. Nobody would blame you. Most people would probably say he made the smart choice, the safe choice, the choice any reasonable person would make. But then, on a cold Tuesday afternoon, something happened that changed everything. Holt was at the police station, looking out the window, still internally debating what to do, when he saw a little girl sitting on a bench outside. Sophia, Elena's daughter. She was 7 years old, her hair tied in 2 braids, and she was wearing a coat that was too big for her, and she was holding something, a drawing. Holt could see it even from a distance. A colorful crayon drawing, probably done at school that day. And Sophia was looking at the police station door with a heartbreaking hope that maybe, just maybe, her mother would come out that door. Holt got out. He hadn't planned it, he hadn't thought about it. He just got out, opened the door and sat on the bench next to Sophia. She looked at him with huge, frightened eyes, but didn't move away. "Are you the sheriff?" she asked in a small voice. Holt nodded. "Are you going to help my mother?" And Holt didn't know what to say, because the honest answer was too complicated for a 7-year-old to understand. So he just looked at the drawing in her hand. "What did you draw?" he asked. Sophia held up the paper so he could see better. It was a drawing of her mother, Elena. Was in the center, large and colorful, with a smile Holt had never seen on her real face. And around her, Sophia had drawn stars, dozens of yellow and gold stars. "Why the stars?" Holt asked. And Sophia, with the seriousness only children possess, replied, "Because my mother is a star. She shines even when it's dark." And then she looked at Holt with those eyes that hadn't yet learned to doubt the world, and asked, "Do you believe her? Everyone says she did something bad, but she didn't. I know she didn't. Do you believe her?" And Holt, looking at that little girl, who had more faith in her mother than the whole world combined, felt something break inside him. Break and reorganize itself into something stronger. He took the drawing from Sophia's hands, looked at it for a long moment, and said, "Yes, I believe her. And I'm going to prove to everyone that she didn't do anything wrong." Sophia smiled. It was a small smile, but a real one. And then she asked if she could give the drawing to her. Mother Holt promised he would. And when Sophia left with the social worker who was temporarily caring for her, Holt stood there alone, holding that crayon drawing, and he understood. He understood that it wasn't about career. It wasn't about reputation. It wasn't about the system, or politics, or power. It was about that girl who deserved to have her mother back. That girl who believed the world could still be fair. And Holt realized that if he didn't fight for Alina, if he chose the safe option, he would be proving Sophia wrong. That the world isn't fair. That powerful people always win. That no matter how brightly you shine, if you are poor and vulnerable, you can be erased. The transformation in Holt was complete at that moment. It wasn't a rational decision. It was a moral one. It was the decision to be the kind of man he wanted to be, not the kind of man the system pressured him to be. He went back up to his office, picked up the blue briefcase, and scheduled a meeting. With the prosecutor, he didn't email, he didn't leave a message. He went to the prosecutor's office in person and said, "I need to talk to you about the Morrison case, and you need to listen." The prosecutor, a man in his 50s with political ambitions written into every calculated move, hesitated. "James, I already told you, this case is closed. The hearing is tomorrow." And Holt put the briefcase on the table. "Not after you see what's in here." The next 2 hours were tense. Holt presented everything, every document, every piece of evidence, every connection. And he watched the prosecutor's face shift from irritation to confusion, from confusion to understanding, from understanding to something that looked like fear. Because the prosecutor immediately understood what this meant. It meant he had almost convicted an innocent woman. It meant the Morrison family had lied. It meant that if this came to light, his career would also be at risk. And for a horrible moment, Holt wasn't sure what the prosecutor would do. You weren't sure if he would choose truth or expediency. The prosecutor closed the folder. He rubbed his face with his hands and said, "Do you know what you're asking for? Do you know how many people will hate you for this? The Morrisons will destroy you. And I'll probably destroy myself, too, if I go through with this." And Holt, thinking of Sophia, thinking of that drawing that was now folded in his pocket, said, "I know. But there's a 7-year-old girl out there who believes her mother is a star. And I'm not going to be the one to extinguish that star just because it's easier." The prosecutor looked at him for a long time, and then nodded, slowly, reluctantly, but he nodded. The impact of that decision was immediate and brutal. The next morning, the case against Alina was officially dismissed. The evidence was presented in a closed hearing. The Morrisons' son was called to testify, and the truth began to emerge. But the Morrisons reacted exactly as Holt expected. They hired more lawyers. They called everyone they knew. They demanded Holt's head on a platter. And they got it. The police chief called Holt into his office the next day and said in a weary voice, "You're being transferred. Effective immediately. That's not a suggestion. It's an order." Holt didn't argue. He didn't plead. He just asked, "Where to?" And the chief replied, "Outback, a town of 5,000. No crime, no future. That's where you'll spend the rest of your career." Holt cleared his desk that afternoon. He packed his things into a cardboard box. And as he did so, he realized something. He didn't feel defeated. He didn't feel regret. He felt free. Free from the burden of serving a corrupt system. Free from the obligation to protect people who didn't deserve protection. Free to simply be human. And when he passed the cell where Alina had been, now empty because she had been released that morning, he felt he had done the only thing that mattered. Had chosen the right side. He had protected those who needed to be protected. And if it cost him his career, then perhaps his career was never worth as much as he thought. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because what happened between Holt and Alina during those days in prison was something neither of them expected. Something that wasn't in any manual, any protocol, any description of what a relationship between an officer and someone in custody should be. But it was happening, and it was real. Holt began visiting Alina every day. Officially, it was to review details of the case, confirm facts, prepare the defense. But the visits began to transform into something different. They started with questions about the morning of the accusation, about the routine at the Morrison mansion, about who had access to what. But then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the conversations changed. They became more personal, more human. And Holt began to see not only the victim of an injustice, but the complete person that Alina was. She told him things she had never told anyone before. About growing up in a different country, in a home where love was something you earned, not something you automatically received. About how she had learned early on that her worth lay in how hard she worked, how useful she was. She talked about her father who left home every day at 5 in the morning and came back too late for dinner. About her mother who always repeated, "Nobody is going to give you anything. You have to prove you deserve it." And Alina had spent her whole life trying to prove it. To prove she deserved to be in the country. To prove she deserved the job. To prove she deserved respect. But it had never been enough. Because the problem wasn't her. The problem was a world that had decided, even before knowing her, that she deserved nothing. Holt listened to all of this, sitting on the other side of the bars, elbows resting on his knees, completely present. Not as a researcher listening to testimony, but as one human being listening to another. And he realized something that hit him like a punch. Alina never had anyone who believed in her. Not as a child. Not when she became a mother. Not when I woke up before sunrise every day to work, until my hands bled. People used her, depended on her, benefited from her work, but no one saw her. No one believed she had value beyond the function she performed. And now, when she most needed someone to believe in her, the whole world had decided she was guilty. Except Holt. And Alina didn't understand why. One night, after yet another long conversation about the case, she finally asked. The question came out tired, almost defeated. Why are you doing this? Why do you keep coming here, spending your time with me, risking your career? I'm nobody. I have nothing to offer you. I have no way to thank you. So why? And Holt remained silent for a long time. Because the truth was, he didn't have a ready answer. He didn't have a logical explanation that made sense in words. He only knew that he couldn't look at her and accept the injustice. He couldn't turn his back on her. He couldn't let her rot in that cell knowing she was innocent. He finally said, because when I look at you, I see someone who has spent their whole life doing everything right and yet has been treated as if they were worthless. And I can't accept that. I can't be the person who sees this injustice and does nothing. His voice broke. Slightly at the end. Not much. But enough for Alina to realize that this wasn't just work for him. It was personal. And for the first time in years, Alina felt something she had forgotten she could feel. She felt she wasn't alone. That there was someone in the world who saw her. Really saw her. Not as a maid, not as an immigrant, not as a suspect, but as a person. The transformation in their relationship happened in layers. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't a cinematic moment where everything changed at once. It was gradual. It was built in late-night conversations, in shared silences, in moments where words weren't necessary, because their presence said it all. Holt started bringing Alina coffee. Not the terrible prison coffee, but real coffee. From the coffee shop he frequented every morning. And Alina, who hadn't had decent coffee in weeks, held that cup as if it were gold. Not because it was coffee, but because it was an act of care. An act that said, I thought of you. I wanted to make your day a little less awful. And Alina began asking about Holt's life, not just as a form of education or distraction, but because she genuinely wanted to know. She wanted to understand the man who was risking everything for her. Holt told her about how he had become sheriff because he believed in justice. He talked about cases he had solved, about people he had helped, but he also talked about the times he had failed, about cases that haunted him, about people he hadn't been able to save. And Alina listened to everything. She listened not with judgment, but with empathy. And Holt realized how long it had been since someone had truly listened to him. Not as a subordinate listening to orders, or as a citizen listening to authority, but as a person listening to a person. The connection between them wasn't physical attraction. It wasn't a soap opera romance with intense glances and sexual tension. It was something deeper and more frightening. It was trust. Pure, vulnerable trust. The kind that only happens when you're at your weakest and someone chooses to stay by your side. Alina, who had built walls around her heart as a survival mechanism, began to let those walls crumble. Not all at once, but brick by brick. And Holt, who had spent years being the strong man, the protector, the one who solved problems without getting emotionally involved, began to realize he was getting involved, deeply. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't want to back down. There was a specific moment that defined everything. It was a particularly difficult night. Alina had just received news that Sophia was having nightmares. The girl woke up screaming every night, looking for her mother. The social worker had called to inform her that some kind of child therapy might be necessary. And Alina, hearing this, broke down. Not dramatically, not with screams or sobs, but silently and devastatingly. She just sat on the floor of the cell, leaned her head against the concrete wall, and closed her eyes. And tears began to stream down her face without sound, without movement, just tears. Holt was on the other side of the bars. And for the first time since it all began, he felt the physical limitation of that metal barrier. He felt the frustration of not being able to simply go in there and hug her, not being able to offer physical comfort. All he could do was talk. So he spoke. He said, I'm going to get you out of here. It's not an empty promise. It's not blind hope. It's a fact. I have the proof. I'm going to get you out of here, and you're going back to your daughter. And Sophia will stop having nightmares, because her mother will be there when she wakes up. And Alina opened her eyes and looked at him through the bars. And she asked in a broken voice, "How can you be so sure?" And Holt answered without hesitation, "Because I won't stop until it happens, no matter what it costs." And Alina believed him, not because she was naive, but because she saw in his eyes, in his tense shoulders, in his determination, that it was true. He wasn't going to stop. He was going to fight until there was nothing left to fight. And at that moment, something changed permanently between them. It ceased to be protector and protected. It ceased to be official and suspect. It became something neither of them could name, but which they both felt with frightening intensity. It became partnership. It became a bond. It became the silent promise that, whatever happened, they would face it together. The visits continued. But now there was a different kind of intimacy. Not sexual, not romantic in the traditional sense, but emotional, deep. They began to share things they didn't share with anyone else. Fears, hopes, regrets. Alina talked about the day Sophia was born, about how she had held that tiny baby and promised she would give her a better life, and how now, trapped in that cell, she felt she had broken that promise. Holt talked about his father, also a police officer who had died in the line of duty, about how he had joined the police force trying to honor his father's memory, but now questioned whether his father would be proud of the choices he made, of the times he followed orders, even when the orders were wrong. And at some point, amidst all those conversations, amidst all those vulnerable moments, Alina realized something. She realized she was beginning to feel something she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just gratitude. Was affection, real, frightening affection? The kind of affection that makes you want to see the person again. The kind that makes you think about them when they're not around. The kind that makes you feel that, maybe, just maybe, you're not as alone in the world as you thought. And Holt was feeling something similar, something that caught him completely off guard. He was used to caring about victims, but this was different. This was caring about Alina specifically, about her likes, her quirks, her fears, her dreams. He found himself thinking about her during the day, wondering if she was okay, if she had eaten, if she was scared. Comment below if you've ever experienced something like this. When someone truly sees you, when someone believes in you unconditionally, it changes everything, doesn't it? Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the day Alina was released should have been the happiest day of her life. It should have been a moment of relief, of victory, of justice finally being served. But it wasn't. Because freedom, Holt and Alina discovered that day, is not the same thing as justice. And it's definitely not the same thing as acquittal. Holt presented the evidence to the prosecutor on a Thursday morning. He went alone, without departmental support, without backup, without anyone to witness or validate what he was doing. Just him, a folder full of irrefutable evidence, and the determination that it had to happen. The prosecutor reviewed everything. It took hours, and in the end, with an expression that mixed relief and fear, he signed the documents. The case against Alina was officially closed. The news spread quickly, but not in the way it should have. Not as innocent woman finally freed, but as Morrison case dismissed on technicalities, as local sheriff causes trouble for respected family. The narrative was already being rewritten, even before Alina left prison. The Morrisons had their lawyers, their connections, their ways of controlling how the story was told, and they used everything. They said the accusations were a misunderstanding, that they had decided not to proceed out of compassion, that Alina was a good person who had made a mistake, and they, in their generosity, were choosing to forgive. Alina heard all of this while an officer processed her release. She heard it on the radio playing in the prison reception area. And every word was like a slap in the face. Because they were stealing even that from her. They were stealing the truth. They were turning her innocence into their forgiveness. As if they had the power to absolve her. As if she owed them gratitude for deciding to stop destroying her life. And the worst part, people believed it. People listened to that version and accepted it. Because it was more comfortable to believe that the powerful family was being magnanimous than to accept that they had been cruel and manipulative from the beginning. When Alina finally stepped through those doors, she expected to feel relief. She expected to feel fresh air, freedom, a new beginning. But what she felt was fear. Paralyzing fear. Because she was free, yes. But for what? Where would she go? What would she do now? Sophia was waiting outside with the social worker. And when the girl saw her mother, she ran. She ran with that uncoordinated speed of a 7-year-old, and threw herself into Elena's arms with such force that she almost knocked her over. And Alina held her daughter, held her tightly, feeling the small, warm body against hers, feeling Sophia's tears wetting her neck. And for a moment, just a moment, it was all worth it. It all made sense. Because she was holding her daughter again, and nothing else mattered. But then Sophia asked, "Can we go home now?" And Alina didn't know what to answer. Because they no longer had a home. The apartment had been evicted. Alina hadn't paid rent for weeks. Her belongings were in boxes at a local church's storage facility, kept by the temporary kindness of strangers. And where would they go now? Alina looked around, searching for Holt. She needed to see him. She needed to thank him. She didn't even know what. She just needed him. And then she saw him, leaning against his car, watching from afar. He didn't approach. He didn't interfere in the moment between mother and daughter. But he was there, present, as he always had been. Alina walked over to him, still holding Sophia's hand, and Holt saw in her face not the joy he expected to see, but something like contained panic. "I don't know what to do," she said softly, so Sophia wouldn't hear. "I have no home. I have no job. I have no money. I'm free." But her voice trailed off, and Holt understood. He understood that freedom without resources is just a different kind of prison. He wanted to say that everything would be all right. He wanted to promise that he would solve everything. But he had learned not to make promises he couldn't keep. So he simply said, "Let's take it one step at a time. First, you need a place to stay tonight. I know someone who has a room to rent. No contract, no guarantor, just until you get organized." But how to organize it? That was the question haunting Alina. Because while the case was closed, her reputation wasn't restored. Nobody in town wanted to hire the woman who almost robbed the Morrisons. It didn't matter that she was innocent. It didn't matter that she had been used as a scapegoat. The narrative was already established. And in a small town, narratives are more powerful than truths. Alina searched for work for weeks. She knocked on doors. She filled out forms, and she was rejected every time. Sometimes politely, sometimes not even that. One woman looked at her and said, "I'm sorry, dear, but I can't risk having someone with your history working here." History, as if she had a criminal record, as if she had been convicted. Elena's transformation during those weeks was painful to watch. Holt saw it. He saw how she was wearing herself down, how hope was being replaced by despair, how she began to doubt whether it had been worth fighting for. Because yes, she was free. But free for what? To live in poverty. To watch her daughter go hungry. To be constantly reminded that, in the eyes of the town, she would always be guilty. And the worst part, the Morrisons faced no real consequences. None. Their son was discreetly sent to a private rehabilitation clinic. An expensive, comfortable clinic, more like a spa than a treatment center. He would stay there for a few months, out of public view, and then return as if nothing had happened. The parents continued their lives normally. They continued attending the same events. They continued to be respected. They remained untouchable. The injustice of it was suffocating. Alina saw on the local news, Morrison family makes generous donation to Children's Hospital. And she wanted to scream. She wanted to tell everyone, these are the same people who destroyed my life to protect their addicted son. These are the same people who falsely accused me and never apologized. But who would believe her? Who would listen? She was just Alina, just the maid, just the immigrant, and they were the Morrisons. And power always wins, no matter how unjust. Holt sensed her frustration. He sensed it because it was also his frustration. He had done everything right. He had found the evidence. He had exposed the truth. And in the end, Alina was free, but destroyed. The Morrisons were untouchable. And him, he was being transferred, demoted, punished for having the audacity to challenge the status quo. Justice had been done on paper. But in reality, the powerful remained powerful, and the vulnerable remained vulnerable. And Holt didn't know how to fix it. He didn't know how to give Alina what she truly deserved. Not just freedom, but dignity. Not just legal absolution, but social absolution. Not just survival, but life. The connection between them deepened even further during this period, because now it wasn't about the case anymore. It wasn't about evidence and hearings anymore. It was about two people trying to figure out how to rebuild something that had been completely destroyed. Holt started showing up at the small room Alina rented. Unannounced. He just showed up. Sometimes with groceries. Sometimes with information about potential jobs. Sometimes just to talk. To remind Alina that she wasn't alone. And Alina, who had lived her whole life without depending on anyone, began to realize that maybe it was okay to depend on someone. Maybe it wasn't weakness. Maybe it was just human. Sophia loved it when Holt showed up. She called him the good sheriff, to distinguish him from the other policemen who had taken her mother away. And Holt, who had never been good with children, discovered that he enjoyed spending time with Sophia. He liked listening to her nonsensical stories about school. He liked seeing the drawings she made. And above all, he liked seeing the smile on Elena's face when she saw her daughter laughing. Because that smile, rare and precious, reminded Holt why it had been worth it. Why it had been worth losing his career, his reputation, his respect. Because some things are more important than status. Some things, like that smile, like that little girl laughing, like that woman finally having a moment of peace. Those things are worth everything. But reality remained difficult. Alina eventually got a job. It wasn't what she wanted. It wasn't what she deserved. It was cleaning work at a roadside hotel. Night shifts, minimum wage, no benefits. But it was something. It was survival. And Alina, who had learned to accept what the world offered, took the job. She worked from 11 at night until 7 in the morning. She came home when Sophia was waking up for school. She slept a few hours. She woke up to pick up Sophia. She spent the afternoon with her, and then she went back to work. It was exhausting. It was unfair, but it was life. And Alina was alive. She was free, and she had her daughter. And for now, that had to be enough. Now I want to delve even deeper into this. Because the moment everything truly changed wasn't when Alina was released. It wasn't when the case was closed. It was weeks later, on a cold October night, when Holt found Alina outside the police station. She shouldn't have been there. She had no reason to be there, but she was. Sitting on the concrete steps, Sophia's backpack in her lap, staring blankly into space. And Holt, who was leaving after a double shift, stopped when he saw her. He stopped because he recognized that posture. It was the posture of someone who had reached their limit, someone who didn't know how to go on anymore. He approached slowly, as if she were something fragile that could break with a sudden movement, and he asked, in a voice softer than usual, "Alina, what are you doing here?" She looked up, and Holt saw something in them that frightened him. He saw a defeat, complete and devastating defeat. "I don't know where to go," she said. She wasn't crying. She was beyond tears. "Sophia is at a friend's house from school tonight. I should be working, But I can't. I can't pretend anymore that everything is okay. That we're okay. That we've made it. Her voice was flat, emotionless, and that was worse than if she were screaming. Holt sat beside her on the steps. He didn't touch her. He didn't try to offer empty words of comfort. He just stayed there, present. And after a long silence, Alina continued. I thought that if I worked hard enough, if I stayed strong, eventually things would get better. But they're not getting better. Every day is harder than the last. Sophia asks why we can't go back to the old house. Why we can't buy the things she wants. Why Mom is always tired, and I don't have answers. Or rather, I do have answers. But I can't give them to her. I can't say, because we were destroyed by powerful people who never paid for what they did. Because the world decided that we don't matter. The transformation at that moment was silent but profound. Because Holt realized that Alina wasn't just talking about her problems. She was giving up. And he couldn't let that happen. Not after everything. Not after fighting so hard to get her out of that prison. He couldn't watch her become a prisoner any other way. So he said, choosing each word carefully, I know you have no reason to trust anyone else. I know the world has given you every reason to believe you're alone in this. But Alina, he paused. He took a deep breath. If you want to rebuild this, you won't do it alone. Alina looked at him, really looked, and for the first time in weeks, something changed in her face. It wasn't hope. Not yet. It was something smaller, more cautious. It was possibility. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry it all alone. What are you saying? She asked. And Holt didn't have an elaborate plan. He didn't have a magic solution. But he had something. He had the truth. I'm saying you don't deserve what happened to you. I'm saying the town may have decided to discard you, but I didn't. I'm saying if you need someone by your side while you rebuild your life, I'm here. Not as sheriff, not as a favor, but as someone who cares. The word matters hung between them, heavy, significant, because they both knew it was more than just casual concern. It was something bigger. Something that had grown during all those prison visits, all those conversations, all those moments where they had been vulnerable with each other in ways they had never been with anyone else. And Alina, for the first time since it all began, for the first time in years perhaps, did something she had never done before. She didn't say no. She didn't pull away. She didn't build a wall. She simply nodded, slowly, hesitantly, but she nodded. I don't know if I can trust again, she said. I don't know if I'm still capable of it. And Holt understood. He understood completely. Because trust, once broken the way it had been broken in Alina, isn't easily rebuilt. It isn't rebuilt quickly. You don't have to trust me today, he said. You don't have to decide anything today. You just have to not give up. You just have to let me help. One day at a time. And there was something in the simplicity of it, in the lack of pressure, in the absence of expectations, that made Alina breathe for the first time in weeks. Really breathe. Holt drove her home that night. Not to his house. To the small room she rented. And on the way, they talked. Not about the case. Not about the Morrisons. But about small things. About how Sophia was doing in school. About a book Alina was trying to read, but never had time for. About how Holt was adjusting to the idea of being transferred. Normal. Conversations. Human conversations. The kind of conversations people who care have. And when they arrived, when Holt stopped the car in front of that dilapidated building, he said, I'll be back tomorrow, and the next day, and the next, until you believe you're not alone. And Alina, for the first time, didn't argue. She didn't say he didn't need help. She didn't insist she could handle it alone. She simply said, thank you. A simple word, but loaded with meaning. Loaded with surrender. Not surrender in defeat, but surrender in acceptance. Acceptance that maybe, just maybe, she needed help. And maybe, just maybe, it was okay to need it. The following days were different. Holt started to really show up, not just for quick visits, but to be present. He helped with practical things. He fixed the broken door lock. He took Sophia to school when Alina was too exhausted. He brought groceries without making a big deal out of it or making a fuss. He just left the bags in the kitchen and went away, and Alina slowly began to let him. She began to see it not as weakness or dependence, but as partnership, as two people supporting each other. And then something began to happen. Something neither of them expected, but which they had both felt growing for weeks. The line between gratitude and affection began to blur. Alina found herself waiting for his visits, thinking about him when he wasn't around, smiling when she heard his car arriving. And Holt found himself looking for excuses to show up, to stay longer, to see her smile, to hear Sophia's laughter, to feel, for the first time in years, that he belonged somewhere. Sophia noticed before any of them. Children always notice. One night, after Holt had left, she asked, "Mommy, does the good sheriff like you?" And Alina, caught off guard, didn't know what to answer. "He's our friend," she said. But Sophia shook her head. "No, he looks at you the way Daddy used to. The way I see in the movies." And Alina felt something tighten in her chest, because Sophia was right. There was something in the way Holt looked at her, something that went beyond concern, something that seemed dangerously like, no, she couldn't think about it. Not now, not when everything was still so fragile. But the heart doesn't follow logic. And the truth was that Alina was feeling something too, something that scared her, because she had learned not to expect anything from anyone. She had learned that depending on someone was the quickest way to be disappointed. But Holt had stayed when everyone else ran away, when the whole world turned its back. Holt had stayed and stayed and stayed, without asking for anything in return, without expectations, no hidden agenda, just stayed. Their emotional journey was reaching a point of no return. They could both feel it. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing that one more step would change everything. And they were both afraid. Holt was afraid of ruining the purest thing he had in his life. Alina was afraid of opening up only to be destroyed again. But at the same time, they both knew they couldn't keep pretending it was just friendship, that it was just protector and protected. It was more. It had become so much more. And then came the moment. It wasn't planned. It wasn't cinematic. It was simple and real. Holt was helping Alina assemble a bookshelf she had bought used. Sophia was sleeping in the room. And in the middle of the work, Alina laughed at something silly, he said. And Holt stopped what he was doing and just looked at her, really looked, and said, without planning, without filtering, "You're amazing, you know that. After everything you've been through, you still laugh, you still fight, you still believe there can be something good." And he stopped. But Alina knew what he was going to say. She saw it in his eyes. And for the first time, Alina didn't back down. She didn't change the subject. She just looked back and said, "Holt, I don't know what to do with what I'm feeling. I don't know if it's right, if it's time, if it makes sense. But I know that when you're not here, I miss you. And when you are, I feel safe. For the first time in so long, I feel safe." And those words, that vulnerable and honest confession, changed everything. And this is where this journey ends for today. Not because the story is over, but because some things need to be felt slowly, lived layer by layer. And I know you felt that with me. You felt every moment Alina almost gave up. You felt every time Holt chose to stay, when it would have been easier to leave. You felt the weight of the injustice, the struggle, the transformation that happens when someone finally truly sees you. If this kind of story resonates with you, if you want to continue walking with me on these deep journeys that touch on what truly matters, subscribing here is the way to stay together. Because I bring you stories like this every week. Stories about real people facing impossible things, about protection when no one else protects, about justice when the system fails, about connections that save lives. Comment below. I'm with you until the end. I read every comment, every word, and I want to know if you're feeling what I'm feeling here. If Alina and Holt touched you the same way they touched me while I was building this story, and if this touched you in any way, if at any point you held your breath, if you felt angry at the Morrisons, if you rooted for Alina, if you believed in Holt, leave a like so I know. It's not about numbers, it's about connection. It's about knowing that I'm not talking alone here. There's a video over here that continues in the same vein. Another story of someone being discredited, of a protector who goes against everything to do what's right. Click and follow along with me there. Because this journey doesn't end. It just continues in another place, with other people, but with the same truth at its core. Everyone deserves to be seen. Everyone deserves to be protected. And sometimes, you just need one person willing to stay. See you soon.